You're listening to the Battle Buddies podcast.
What is the wisest or most profound thing a student of yours has taught you?
Ooh, goodness. So one of my students, Ross, I taught for several years at my Elk Grove school. And Ross got in a car accident with his father at a young age, and it caused some brain damage and some learning difficulties. And as a result, having him learn memorized techniques became a huge challenge, So if I was teaching him a combination of a sequence of moves put together or a kata, I would show it to him and we would practice it 100 times. And the next day he wouldn't remember any of it. And so what did that teach me? That taught me patience. But what I learned from Ross, and pretty much anybody that worked with Ross, is he knew that he had these challenges. Like, he knew what his cognitive challenges were, but he always had the biggest smile on his face, and he always had the best attitude. And to me, that was just amazingly inspirational, that despite all of these mental challenges that he had to persevere, and his attitude, I never saw him feel bad about himself or anything like that. And that Ross is one of those guys that if I'm ever like thinking about complaining, or when I was competing a lot and I was tired and I didn't want to wake up and run, it's like, hey, what would Ross do? Ross would have a smile on his face and he'd go do it. So 100%. I mean, there's been other stories and different moments, but that was a big one that stood out.
Isn't it amazing how subjective suffering is? I remember we were talking about this last episode, Adam, but we were saying how sometimes the people who have suffered the most are the most joyful. Mm-hmm. We had a student recently who lost, I think it was her cousin and her brother in the same week, and was still happy as always. And their family, they were suffering, of course, but they were still joyful. And it makes you, like you said, it makes you go, man, what do I really have to complain about?
Yeah, it can. I mean, we've seen the opposite too, but, I think it kind of goes back to, for those folks that took a challenge in their life, a difficult moment, and they still found a way to find joy, what are they asking themselves? What questions are they asking themselves compared to someone else that went through the same type of experience, but they came out the other end negative? That's what I try to figure out, is how did you get there? How did you process that?
To switch gears a little bit to sort of the competition, I know you spent a lot of time in competition, especially jiu-jitsu. So when you look at competing in MMA, for example, like when you were in Rogue Fights, how does it differ from sort of the jiu-jitsu aspect like Naga or the American Cup? How does training and the execution of it differ from each other?
From MMA and jiu-jitsu, or just competition in general?
I suppose competition in general, but I know that prepping for, say, a jiu-jitsu match obviously is going to be different than an MMA. What do you look at as the main things to keep in mind, and also how are they similar to each other?
Yeah, well, I think a big piece of it is mindset and experience kind of being put in the fire, if you will. And I think that is true with any level of competition, and any type of competition. Obviously, I've had a lot of martial arts kind of experience there. So as a kid and then growing up into my teenage years, I did a lot of point fighting, a lot of karate point fighting. And then when I was doing Eskrima, I did a lot of full contact stick fighting with my instructor, who was a Eskrima instructor, Master Nito Naval. He was a 2-time world champion in stick fighting. And then from there, I started competing a lot in jiu-jitsu as a purple belt and as a brown belt. And then I did one MMA fight. And so I think looking at competition, and this is something I learned from one of my Muay Thai coaches, Crew Patrick Riviera, is he's got a very successful Muay Thai competition team, is looking at martial arts competition kind of like how you look at sports competition. So if you and I were to say, hey, let's start a basketball team and let's go play basketball. and we have a couple games, we lose a couple, we win a couple, we lose a couple. We don't take the losses too hard, right? It's like, hey, we lost, no big deal. Let's go play next Saturday. But when you're a martial artist and you lose, you're alone. And if you lose, especially a combative match, whether it's a kickboxing or karate or jiu-jitsu or MMA, for some reason those losses they sting a lot more than when you're playing a team sport. Does that make sense? But if you can kind of look at it like, you know what, I just gained experience. I'm going to do 10 matches, and each one I'm going to learn something from. And I know for me, I've learned way more every time I've lost than when I've won. And so just kind of, I guess, setting the expectation when it comes to competition. And I always tell people this when I have people in my class that are competing in some way, shape, or form, is the whole goal with competition is to gain experience. If you win, great. That's the cherry on top. But if you lose, I'm not going to be disappointed in you. If you go out and you give your best, I'm going to be proud. And there's so many times that I've had to tell that to myself right before the match starts. You know, if I'm in the bullpen, the jiu-jitsu, and like, I'm starting to think about like all this pressure I put on myself. Like, well, what happens if I lose? Like, you know, everybody's going to think I suck, or like, you know, people aren't going to like me or whatever. And it's like, okay, what does success look like? What is success? For me, success is that I go out and I give my best. And if I go out and give my best, I can hold my head up high. Whether I lost or I won, it doesn't matter. I'm going to learn something. So that's kind of competition in general. Now, kind of to the other part of your question regarding MMA, I just had this conversation with a gentleman I work with recently, about 6 months ago, because he went out and he did his first MMA match, and he lost like in the first minute or so. And he said, "Oh man, I want to do another MMA match in like 2 months." And I just kind of had to pull him aside. I said, "Time out." I said, "We need to work on your skill development a little bit, because MMA itself is a combination of a lot of different martial arts. And if you don't have any base in these different martial arts, then you have no business getting an MMA match." And you know, the main disciplines in MMA are boxing, kickboxing, and or Muay Thai, wrestling, and Jiu-Jitsu. You know, there's some people that do a little bit of Taekwondo or Judo or Sambo or whatever it may be, but those four are kind of like the main disciplines. And so if you've never wrestled before, you know, or you've never done a Jiu-Jitsu class before, or you've never boxed before, then go spend 6 months doing at least one of those disciplines and getting at least a basics understanding and a skill of those things. And what I told my coworker is, okay, I want you to start signing up for jiu-jitsu tournaments, and I want you to start signing up for these kickboxing tournaments. When you start winning these jiu-jitsu tournaments as a white belt, and maybe, you know, doing okay at the kickboxing tournament, then let's go do another MMA match. But if you're not winning in a subcategory of MMA, then you're probably not going to win in MMA. You need to have a fundamental understanding of these different martial arts to really do well. And I got that strategy. This is something I created. I got that strategy from Mighty Mouse's coach. He said the same thing. He said, go do these different subcategories of tournaments and competitions and do well at those, and then let's start putting the pieces together.
Yeah. Do you think people often will go into those for the wrong reasons? Like, oh, I want to be the next UFC star, and that's why I go for MMA. There just doesn't seem to be any glory in the other ones. Do you think that's why they try to go, I suppose for lack of a better term, they try to go all in with grappling and punching and kicking when they might not be pros at any of them?
120%. Yeah, I mean, the bottom line is there's a lot of ego involved, right? Especially for young guys. You know, they want to look cool. They want girls to like them. I get it. You know, the problem with MMA is it's not a basketball match. You're putting your body at risk of getting very much injured. And the gentleman that I spoke of earlier, when I told him, hey, I don't want you to do another match in the next 2 months, it's because I care about him. He didn't know what he was getting himself into, and he's either going to get knocked out or he's going to get something broken. And so, it's a huge risk stepping into the cage and not having the skill set to really defend yourself. But yeah, absolutely, it's a lot of ego involved.
Yeah. Sort of a strange question, but what do you think is the goal of competing in general? Jiu-Jitsu, MMA, kickboxing, Muay Thai, whatever. Why should people go do it?
I think to challenge themselves, to face your fears. That's probably the biggest thing is, when you're competing, especially in martial arts, I mean, the biggest thing that you're trying to do other than best the other person is you're trying to conquer yourself, and you're trying to conquer your mind and all the fears and doubts that are associated with that, leading up to the match, visualizing it. Am I going to do well? What if this happens? All that kind of stuff. I mean, there's such a carryover to life, right? You take that same concept into other areas of your life where you're having fears and doubts, and you're like, man, if I did it in this competition, this MMA competition or this jiu-jitsu competition or this kickboxing competition, where I was able to kind of work through those fears and those doubts and still think logically, what other areas of my life can I do that? What other areas of my life can I try to conquer my fear? So I guess to answer your question, that would be, I'd say, the biggest benefit of competing is you learn a lot about yourself.
Yeah.
To get even more martial arts specific here, something that I've learned since I got my black belt is how important it is to train the fundamentals and get reps on the fundamentals and do those over and over and over again. And I personally am trying to kind of break into the jiu-jitsu world right now. So I wanted to ask you, what would you consider to be the fundamentals of jiu-jitsu?
The thing about jiu-jitsu, it's always evolving, right? It really depends on what your goal is, because there's almost two, they're intertwined, but there's also a couple categories, and is it competition or is it self-defense? Because there are some schools of jiu-jitsu that if I'm just focusing on competition, I'm going to do certain things first compared to if I'm just focusing on self-defense. But to give you, I guess, my best answer for that question, kind of an overlying principle with jiu-jitsu is position and then submission. So if you don't have proper position of where you're supposed to be, then those submissions aren't going to be there. And if you are very good at controlling the positions, you have a much better opportunity to get a submission and win. So as far as what should you practice first, or what are those fundamentals, is work on getting out of bad positions. Work on, if someone's mounted me, I have no business learning an arm bar if I don't know how to get out of mount because I'm not even going to be where I'm supposed to be. So learn how to get out of bad positions, learn how to transition from bad positions to good positions. And then, learn a few submissions, but make the main focus on escaping, getting out. Surviving is a big one. Like, before you can even escape, you got to survive. So what I mean by that is if someone has me mounted, before I can get them off, I have to know how to survive. So if I'm sticking both arms up in the air to try to push someone off, like, I'm giving you my neck, I'm giving you my arms. So I got to learn how to position myself correctly where I'm not even giving you free stuff, right?
Mm-hmm. I think it was I don't remember. It was one Pro Mac, but I learned from a very helpful jiu-jitsu coach. He said, play it like poker, right? Because you're not going to put your hands out and show everyone your hand. You're going to keep your arms close, and that helped me a ton. So for you, as a black belt in jiu-jitsu, what would you say is your favorite position to do submissions in, and which one do you think you're just the best at controlling?
Oh gosh, I think it's going to vary from person to person, and it's changed. It's kind of like seasons, right? Like, you have different seasons of your life and your journey. I would say lately, in the last 6 months, my favorite position just happens to be the mount. I feel really comfortable there, but it's changed over the years. Sometimes it was side control or knee on belly or the back, but last 6 months, and maybe that's just because it's something that I'm kind of consciously focusing on. I'm putting myself there. And then you said my favorite submission is an armbar from the mount.
Armbar from the mount.
Yeah, and again, it's just something that I've really been honing in on the last few years, but the last 6 months I've just got a few series that I've been focusing on. And remember how earlier I was talking about when you go with people that are better than you, you're mostly working on your defense, and when you're going with people that aren't as good as you have an opportunity to experiment on your offense. And so I've really kind of taken that approach is when I go with people that I can usually best, then I'll purposely put myself in mount and I'll purposely try to go for this arm bar, because I know that if I can get 2,000 arm bars, then I'm going to get really good at arm bars. But if I go, okay, today I'm going to do arm bars, tomorrow I'm going to do triangles, the next day I'm going to do guillotines, the next day I'm not really getting super good at that skill, right? I'm just bouncing around from a lot of different things. So it's more of a conscious effort.
Yeah. Last question on that. Which is the position that you least like people putting you in, that you get there and you go, oh man, I'm there again?
Again, it's going to vary from person to person. I mean, the back is always, for me, probably, I can defend pretty well, but a lot of things have gone wrong for someone to take my back.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, they passed my guard, they got to side control, they got mount, and then somehow I gave up my back. Like, there's a lot of bad things that happened. There's a reason that you get 4 points in a jiu-jitsu match if you get someone's back, because it is one of the hardest positions to get, and that's kind of almost a game over position. So I would definitely say the back.
Yeah. Moving on to our last, I guess, big question, then we'll move on to a couple of rapid fires. What is the legacy that you hope to leave? So however much longer you're in martial arts, maybe a lifetime, when all that is gone, what is the legacy that you hope to leave, and how do you wish that those under you are going to be inspired by your example?
I've been extremely lucky to have my instructor Dave Kovar mentor me, since I've been training, and so I feel like a lot of what I want to do with my legacy is continue on with his legacy, because he's done a lot for the martial arts industry, for instructors in the schools. But I think for me, I'd like to continue to help grow the martial arts industry to impact, future generations in a positive way. So I feel like I can do that specifically with my skill set in training instructors, because I think, unfortunately, while I feel like martial arts is gaining a lot of popularity through UFC and MMA, I want to remain true to kind of the morals and the values that martial arts has a foundation of, because I feel like there's kind of a distinction between being a martial artist and a fighter. I could be a really good fighter, and that means I know the skills, but it doesn't mean I have that martial arts mindset of, respect and integrity and courtesy and, all these things that we learn in like a traditional martial arts school. So I think my legacy that I want to create is that you can be both. You could be a really good martial artist and be a progressive martial artist and learn Jiu-Jitsu and Muay Thai and all these things and be a good instructor, and you don't have to sacrifice some of those morals that you learn.
Nice. That was a lot of good stuff there. So let's move on. We're gonna go to a couple of rapid fire questions. So whatever comes off the top of your head, go for it. And if we spend 20 minutes per question, that's also perfectly fine. The first one is a little bit of a silly one, because I definitely know my answer, but I'm curious of yours. Growing into being a coach, who was your, I guess I'll put it in quotations, who was your celebrity crush, your martial arts celebrity crush, if you will?
Who was my celebrity crush?
That one martial artist. So for me, it's Grandmaster Chip Townsend.
Okay.
The martial artist, you go, oh man, they're just the coolest, They're just amazing. I'd love to meet them, get to know them, spend time with them, pick their brain, stuff like that. If you had one martial artist who you maybe got 24 hours with to just talk with them and learn as much as you could and soak up as much information, who would that be?
It'd probably be, well, can I give you two answers?
100%.
Okay, so the first one would be, so when I started training, I told you that I started training because I saw Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And one of the turtles in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles was this guy, Ernie Reyes Jr.
Yes, I got to meet him. He's so cool.
Yeah, so when I was a gold belt, I'd only been training like less than a year. He actually came to our school. Ernie Reyes Jr. came to our school with his team, the West Coast demo team, which at the time, and they still probably are, like the best demo team in the world. And I remember seeing him and realizing, oh my gosh, this is one of the Ninja Turtles, and I want to be a Ninja Turtle, and he's at my school, and he's performing a demo. I'm going to lose my mind. And so that was like, for me, that was like my white belt moment. That was like, this is something I want to do, you know, and getting a chance to reconnect with him a couple years ago and tell him that story was just amazing, you know, to tell him, hey, you were the person that really kicked it off for me. I think modern day now, I mean, I look up to so many martial artists. It's hard to pick just one, but I'm a huge fan of George St. Pierre, the Jiu-Jitsu champion. I feel like he's one of those guys that, you know, has that martial artist mentality. I really admire and appreciate the way that he conducts himself as a martial artist. And I think, you know, most people know that he came from a traditional karate background. I believe it was Shotokan. I think it was Shotokan. So when you see him come out of the mat, he's wearing that traditional gi. But he's also evolved as a martial artist. You know, he's become an amazingly good jiu-jitsu practitioner, a boxer, a wrestler. So he's learned all these amazing things, and he went on to be an amazing UFC champion. But I would love to pick his brain because he's still in great shape. He didn't acquire too much damage, you know. And so when I think about where do I want to be as a martial artist, I want to be doing this my whole life, and I want to continue to train hard. So I would love to know kind of what his habits are, you know, because when you look at a guy like that, it's like, what does he do on a daily basis that other people don't do, you know?
What are your words to the critics who say, and this one probably is not going to be a small one, but what are your words to the critics who say that martial arts is promoting violence?
I would say understand how you feel. I feel like to some degree, martial arts does promote violence, especially when you watch, you know, the UFC. And so that's their whole promotion is to promote that. And I would also say that is one slice or area of the martial arts community, and that doesn't necessarily represent all of the martial arts community. If you go to a traditional martial arts school that are teaching, you know, self-defense, they're also teaching character, and they're also teaching you how to be confident. And a lot of the violence that occurs, especially male-on-male violence, occurs based out of insecurity. Because if I need to try to beat you up, why do I need to do that? Because I'm not confident in myself. Then I need to try to beat you up so I feel better about myself. Well, why is that? Because I'm insecure. And so if I can learn something like martial arts where I feel confident in myself, I feel good about myself, I don't feel like I need to go to someone else to hurt them. And I guess the other analogy that makes sense is, you know, if you take a kid that doesn't play piano and you put him in a room with a piano, what is he going to do? You know, he's going to sit down, he's going to probably bang at the keys for a little bit, and it's not going to sound very good. But if you take a kid that knows how to play piano, you put him in a room with a piano, he's going to sit there and he's going to play beautiful music. The same thing is with martial arts. If you teach a child martial arts, they're less likely to abuse it. It's the people that don't train and they've never trained, they're more likely to get in a fight, because they've never been hit in the face before, and they don't know what it's like. And I've found that you take two extremes. You take the kid that's really like hyperactive and excited, and martial arts can help them focus and feel confident. And then you take the shy, timid kid, and that timid kid kind of comes out of their shell and helps them get more confident. So I think martial arts can promote violence. It just depends on where you look. I think it's like, I've always heard this analogy like, okay, if I'm at a big party and I've got binoculars on and I look at one corner of the party and there's two people fighting in that corner, I might go, well, this is a horrible party. But I'd take a look at another corner of the room and there's two people laughing and having a good time. Oh, this is a great party. Where do I choose to put my focus? Right? So if I'm focusing on the bad aspects of martial arts, yeah, absolutely, it can seem violent. But that's not everything, that you see. And you go to your, most martial arts schools that you'll see on, down the street, there's going to be a guy in there that's going to try to do his best to positively impact his students.
Do you think that the idea of training people and also training them morally and instilling in them character, how long do you think that's been synonymous with martial arts? Because as far as I have known, that's been the case for almost forever, at least, for lack of a better term, modern traditional martial arts. Mm-hmm. Do you think that's something that originated somewhere, or does it just come with the idea of strength needs self-control?
Boy, that's a really good question. I don't know if I have the answer to that. This is my best guess, okay, is most martial arts were originated in Asia, and whether it was martial arts in Japan or Okinawa, a lot of those martial arts were integrated with Budo. And so Budo is the way of the samurai, the principles of a samurai, how they would try to live with morals. And so those principles of Budo got infused with a lot of Asian martial arts. And some of those principles got transferred over and some of them didn't. How martial arts, Asian martial arts anyway, came to America mostly was from GIs that were overseas. So I would go overseas, whether it was Korea or Japan, and I would learn Taekwondo or karate or whatever, Aikido or, Japanese Jiu-Jitsu. And then I would bring it to America. Well, most of these Marines or military people, they would teach classes like they were military people, right? Like, I'm a drill sergeant. And so a lot of schools kind of got Americanized, if you will, and some schools brought over, I would say the majority of the schools were brought over some of those morals and things like that. And that really comes more from, in my opinion, more kind of the Asian culture. I see it also in Muay Thai. I see those same types of kind of cultures. I would see where it's lacking more is, unless the coach is conscientiously teaching that as part of their curriculum, is more, if someone comes from just a strict boxing background or a strict wrestling background, because those are more Americanized, they aren't as entwined with the concept of Budo. And it's not to say that there aren't, wrestling coaches that aren't instilling respect and things like that. It's not what I'm trying to say. But wrestling on its own doesn't have a long, hundreds of years of history of morals that have been infused in that type of curriculum. So I think more and more, I think, we're starting to kind of see that separation in traditional martial arts, and kind of like, that's why I said there's a difference between being a martial artist and being a fighter. Like you could be really good at the skills, but martial arts is hopefully should be more than that.
Yeah.
Next question. If you could only train in 3 martial arts styles, what would they be and why?
Oh gosh. So first off, I wish I could say all of them, because here's the thing. Honestly, is I feel like, unfortunately, in martial arts, I see that sometimes there can be kind of a toxic, divisive culture. You know, you see it all the time. Like, my style is better than your style. You know, it's like, gosh darn it, can we just get over that already?
It's completely
you know?
unnecessary.
You know, it's like politics or religion, you know, like the guy I voted for is better than the guy you voted for or whatever. And, you know, it's just really unnecessary. So I preframe that by saying I love and appreciate all martial arts, okay? For one reason or another, I think that they all have value. I feel like you can learn something different from all of them. If I was to train in, and again, this is speaking from my limited exposure to styles of martial arts, because there's a lot of styles that I've never trained in and probably never will. So I don't know how great they are, right? I would say Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, because I feel like it is still a martial art that's growing, in the sense that it still changes. It's not set in stone. The curriculum isn't set in stone. It's still changing year after year after year after year. You can train really hard and not go home like completely beat up every day. You know, where if I train Muay Thai, which I love, and I'm sparring super duper hard every single day, then I'm going to be beat up every day. But I would say Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I would also say Muay Thai, but that's training in a safe way. And one thing I learned when I went to Thailand and I trained there is those guys aren't training 100% every single day. You know, they're training at like 30, 40% when they're sparring every day. And that's because they're fighting every weekend. They're preserving their bodies. They save the hard stuff for the pads so they can be good technically. So I would say Muay Thai, I feel like I'm just falling in love with that martial art. I didn't realize how technical it was before I started training. It just looked like, you know, karate with elbows and knees. And it's a lot different. So I would say, yeah, Jiu-Jitsu, Muay Thai. Man, if I was to pick a third, I would probably, even though I haven't done this in years and years and years, I would probably say something like Tai Chi. Because, you know, you got the yin and the yang, right? The yang is like hard, powerful, but it's good to have that yin side too, where you're getting soft and fluid. And Tai Chi is something I could do when I'm 90 years old.
Yeah, I remember doing yoga a while back, and I went, "Oh, this is so relaxing."
Yoga's the best.
Because at first I was thinking, "What am I gonna get out of this?" I was probably 17 at the time or something like that. What am I really gonna get out of this? And then I took it, and I went, "Oh man, I'm so relaxed. Oh, this is great."
Yoga is so good for mobility. It's the best.
Mm-hmm. And I think what you said is true too. You can do it forever. You can do it for as long as you can. I know I'm probably not going to be training the same way I am now when I'm 70. I'm pretty certain I won't be. But having martial arts you can fall back to is nice too.
Yeah. My next question is, I wanted to hear about what are your current goals as a martial artist?
As a martial artist, I've got several. So I mentioned that I earned my black belt in Jiu-Jitsu about 5 years ago, but I actually haven't competed yet as a black belt. So one of my goals is to start competing again by the end of this year, 2022. I just got to get my weight down to competition ready. I've thought about maybe doing another MMA match. I don't know. I'm 41, so I'm kind of old, but I could do another one of those. I'd like to earn some type of instructor certificate in Muay Thai, and I know that means I need to improve my Muay Thai knowledge, and so that's been one thing that I have a goal for in the future, is to continue to increase my knowledge in Muay Thai. also to increase my knowledge in Eskrima. So Eskrima, I really fell in love with in like 97, and my instructor, Master Nino Noval, I was like always training 3 or 4 times a week, doing Eskrima tournaments, and ended up getting my black belt in Eskrima from him. But it hasn't been something that I've been like super passionate about the last decade or two. It's just, I've kind of maintained the skill level that I've at, but I haven't really grown a lot. So I'd like to get a little bit better at my Eskrima. And part of that is by design, because I know I can do Eskrima when I'm older. But I can't necessarily do Muay Thai, when I'm 70 years old. So I'm trying to do the martial arts now while I'm still relatively healthy, and that I can. And then when I get older, I'm going to do some of the stuff that,
you have like a whole plan.
I have a whole life plan. Yeah. Because, this is the time, right? This is the time for me to get good at some of these more physical martial arts. And when I get older, I can kind of focus on the less physical ones.
Yeah. And then just out of curiosity, as a teacher of teachers, do you have goals for your student teachers as well?
Well, I think first and foremost, I think I want to try to continue to kind of stoke the fire of them enjoying their study of martial arts. I think that's my first objective. So encouraging that, giving them time to do that. And it's funny, a lot of people think that, when they hear like, oh, you teach martial arts for a living, oh, that must mean that you're training every day, or you get to train, hours a day. But as you guys know, when you're teaching, you're not necessarily training.
Yep.
Right? And so you have to be way more mindful and proactive with figuring out, okay, I'm training everybody else, but when the heck am I going to train? And if you don't do that, it can really get away from you. So how I want my future instructors, how I want them to develop is to continue to get better at martial arts, and to continue asking themselves, how can I be a better teacher today? And if I'm asking those questions, and then I'm going to find those answers. How can I continue to service others? How can I continue to serve my students better?
In this next question, I'm excited to hear your answer for this one, which is, if you were to hypothetically teach a class with 10 students that you had never met before, and you knew that you would never see them again, what would you teach them in just one class?
Can I ask some clarifying questions? Like,
yes.
How old are they?
Let's go with they're teenagers.
They're teenagers. Okay. Boys or girls? Or mix?
Let's go with mixed.
Okay.
Make it hard on you.
I'm never going to see them again. I think the first thing I'd like to try to do is build some rapport with them. I think you learn more from people that you like compared from people that you don't like. And so with teenagers, sometimes teenagers, depending on who they are, can feel maybe a little unsure of themselves or worried a lot about what other people think. So trying to break down some of those barriers early on in a class of, getting to know them a little bit, joking around. So try to bring their guard down a little bit. And then from there, I would probably teach them something that's going to challenge them, but something that's going to have them walk away going, wow, I can be good at this. So I'm not going to teach them something super advanced and too complex where they're going to walk away going, oh man, I'm never going to get that. So I'd probably teach them some basics. I'd probably teach them like a jab, a cross, a front kick, an elbow, stuff that you could teach pretty, easy, and actually have them hit something, because when you hit something, you're like, wow, it wakes up your body a little bit, and it makes you feel alive, and it makes you feel like, wow, I'm actually powerful. I just hit this bag, I kicked this bag. That was pretty cool. So I want them to feel that physiology in their body, that I actually hit something and I feel good. I'd want them to get a good sweat, and I'd want them to walk away going, wow, this was fun.
I'm going to ask another one off of that.
Okay.
So now more specifically, let's say that it was a group, we're going to go with senior in high school, teenage girls about to go off to college, and maybe looking to learn some things just to protect themselves. I know we've had people come in sort of in those shoes of, we're about to send our daughter to college and we just want her to be confident. We want her to be able to sort of protect herself. What would that class look like then?
Well, we actually do seminars for this, and usually it's a 2-hour seminar, so I'll try to condense that 2 hours into like a 3 or 5 minute answer if I can. The biggest thing that I like to work on with teenage girls going off to college is their mindset. And my safety is more important than your feelings, because I think sometimes, especially with girls, they may or may not feel comfortable verbalizing when they're uncomfortable, especially around, a man that's making them feel uncomfortable. And so how do we get that young woman to feel powerful? And I think one of the ways we can do that is with our voice, and getting them to look someone in the eye and say, hey, back off, right? And get them in some type of confident martial posture where they've got their knees bent, they're balanced, their hands are up protecting their face, and they can make someone that could be a potential predator think twice about pursuing that person, and make sure that they don't look or act like a victim, but they look like someone that's going to give them a hard time. I think that's probably more important than any martial arts move that you teach them, is what is the perception. When a predator is looking for someone to go after, they're not just going to randomly choose someone. They're going to be looking, and they're going to be, who am I going to pick to go after? And I want to make sure that their body language that they're putting out isn't giving signals that I'm an easy target.
Yeah.
And so things like their posture, their eye contact, their tonality of their voice. So that would be the first thing, is we're going to work a lot on mindset, creating good habits. Then I'm going to work on balance. If I grab someone by the wrist and I tug them and I'm trying to take them somewhere, do they know just how to step forward with one leg and bend their knees and keep their balance? Or is it really easy for them to me to take them somewhere, right? Because when you think of man on man versus a man on woman, man on man is usually 9 times out of 10, it's going to be an ego-based fight, right? It's going to be like a bar fight or whatever. Men versus woman is going to be more of either an abduction, or I'm going to try to take you somewhere, and I'm going to try to control you. So it's a completely different dynamic, right? So how a female looks, acts is important, making sure that they're balanced. And then from there, I'm going to give them some basic strikes to key targets. And I don't really care, honestly, about actually how they strike. I'm going to give them ways to strike, but what I care most about is they know what part of the body to hit. They're going for the nose, they're going for the eyes, they're going for the groin. Those are areas that doesn't matter how much you lift weights or whatever, you can't condition your eyeballs to take a thumb, right? That's why in MMA, if you get poked in the eye or hit in the groin, you get 5 minutes to recover. I mean, bottom line, if that was a real life scenario, the fight's over at that point. So, I'm going to teach them a palm strike to the nose. I'm going to teach them a knee to the groin, just enough for them to create enough space and run away.
Nice. That's a good answer. We are down to our last section. This is audience question. We just have a couple of them. The first one, I guess we talked a little bit about this, but what is the biggest thing that you've learned from your fight/tournaments?
The biggest thing that I've learned is losing makes you better. That's how you grow the most, is when you lose. It's cliche, but I've heard it a lot. You either win or you learn, and I think that's so true. Is that the other part of it is kind of, what is success? And one of my favorite coaches that I love to read about, his name is John Wooden, and he was the most successful college basketball coach in college history. So he had 10 national championships, I think, over the course of 15 years. And he never talked about winning or losing with his players ever, which is pretty amazing considering he had 10 national championships. And his definition of success is doing the best that you're capable of doing. And reminding myself of that every time I would go compete is, hey, if I lose, I'm still going to be proud of myself because I did the best that I was capable of doing. So I have to kind of remind myself that in other areas of my life, like if I didn't achieve this goal that I wanted to achieve, okay, well, did I do my best? Yeah, I did. Okay, then I should feel good. So I think that's probably the biggest thing that competition has taught me, is how I view myself and how I learn.
Next one is, do you have a favorite or go-to drill or game when you're teaching a class?
Can I ask what age group it is again?
We'll go all three. How about this? We'll start young, 4 to 6 year olds, or maybe 7 to 12. We'll go that younger age group.
Yeah, so a go-to drill, I always like to do, like especially if I'm working with kids I haven't worked with before and I need to kind of like figure out how to keep their attention, is some type of focus game. And so a big one that I'll do is, I call it the attention stance. We'll do an attention stance. When I say attention stance, or if I say class, hup, they all have to stand really still with their hands to their sides and they can't move. So one thing I'll do is I'll have them walking around the mat, and if I clap my hands, it's a race to see who can get there the fastest. And then we'll do that a couple times, and then I'll say, okay guys, now you guys can be as silly as you want and be as goofy. And as soon as I clap my hands, you have to go from being silly and goofy to totally focused. And so I always like to start with that, because it shows them that they can do it. It also shows the parents that look what we can do. You know, we can get them disciplined when we need to. With teens, that teen age group, I try to get them outside of themselves a lot. So I'll usually do some type of team building physical exercise where they're having to like stay connected to some degree. Like I saw this drill yesterday that I'd forgotten about, that I was like, oh, it's a fun drill, where basically everybody's holding a plank in a row, and then one person at the end has to army crawl underneath everybody else and then pop up to the other side in a plank, and then the next person has to go under, right? So some kind of drill like that, where like they're all working together physically, and it creates a bonding opportunity. Because I think especially with teenagers, they need to feel like they're part of a group. And then for adults, one of the things I notice with adults, especially adults that weren't really athletic growing up, is their footwork and how to move, especially moving laterally. I notice a lot of adults, they know how to move forward, they know how to move back, but when they start moving laterally, they cross their feet. And when they cross their feet, or their feet come together, they have more opportunity to get off balance, to trip and fall. So I like to just have them work on moving around the mat without crossing their feet. And I know it sounds silly, but I'll kind of run up to them with like a bag and try to push them a little bit, just gently, because I want to see, can I bump you or push you and have you not trip and have you not lose your balance? Because that's the most important thing, is that you've got good base. You can't strike if you don't have good base. You can't defend. You can't avoid a takedown. You can't take somebody down if you don't have good base. So that's going to be the first thing.
A little follow-up. This is just a Gabe question. What would you say is one of those golden drills that you should use when you're dealing with a rowdy or unresponsive class?
A rowdy or unresponsive class? Well, before I even do a drill, I would probably have some type of, I mean, you guys know this because you're both Satori Alliance certified, is I would try to get them refocused with a focus anchor. And then I would bring everybody together in a tight huddle and just say, hey guys, we're going to do a drill. And I'd kind of pre-frame that I expect them to be focused, right? So if they haven't been focused and I don't address it, then kind of shame on me, right? I need to, like, we're going to hit this head on, guys. Like, hey, I want you guys to have fun, but I need you guys to kind of step it up a little bit with your focus, and here's what we're going to do. And then from there, I'd usually get everybody up, and one of my favorite games to get everybody back focused again is Sensei Says. So it's just like Simon Says, but it's Sensei Says. And anytime I get you to do something or say something that Sensei didn't say to do, you have to do a push-up and you get to come back in the game. Or you have to sit down and you're out. Either way.
I never thought about doing it with a push-up. That's pretty smart.
Yeah.
I might try that sometime. And then the last audience question, I guess, is sort of two parts. In your opinion, what is the most fun martial art you've ever practiced? And what is one of your favorite martial arts that you don't have a black belt in?
Again, it's hard to say. when I was a teenager, when I was like 17, 18, I used to, be really into like tricking, and doing like flashy kicks and 540s and all these kind of different kicks. That was just a really fun time. I mean, I created a lot of memories there. I met a lot of my really good friends now doing all that, what's called sport karate, and doing fun, fancy kicks. I would say now it's probably jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
It's so great. You get physically challenged, but also mentally challenged. Each match is like a chess match. So it's like you're playing like real life chess with another man, or woman. And you just get to meet a lot of cool people.
Yeah. I've never said this to a Jiu-Jitsu Black Belt, so I'm wondering if you think this is accurate. I've said that Jiu-Jitsu is like chess if chess had 1,000,000 pieces.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Mm-hmm.
I would agree with that.
And then the last part, and maybe I'll change the phrasing just a tad. So what is one of your favorite arts that you don't have a black belt in? Or maybe what is one of your favorite arts that most people don't know about?
I would love to have a black belt in judo. I studied judo very briefly. Actually, the oldest school here in Sacramento is a judo school that was around, I think, since the 1930s. Really cool school. I trained there for like 6 months. Its mat wasn't like traditional mats now. It was basically stretched canvas over, I think, 6 inches of sawdust.
Whoa.
So it's pretty cool. It's just a really interesting platform to fall on. But I would love to have a black belt in judo. I never dedicated enough time to it. I think it's just a beautiful martial art. A martial art that not a lot of people know of, that I would say probably have never trained, is, if you're talking with people that haven't trained a lot, it's probably Sambo. It's kind of like, most grapplers have heard of Sambo, but if you haven't, Sambo is a Russian martial art that it's typically practiced with a jiu-jitsu gi top and then shorts and essentially wrestling shoes. And it's a lot like jiu-jitsu, but their big focus is leg locks. And so they're really, really, really good at leg locks, which is interesting because in the last decade, jiu-jitsu has really made a huge shift to a lot more leg locks. So a lot of people that were good at Sambo are getting kind of sought out from jiu-jitsu people because they realize now, like, oh, these guys were masters at this thing that we want to get good at now.
Yeah. Do you think it was sort of how the Dutch were influenced by the Muay Thai fighters going, man, I want to be able to do something that they can't? You think it was sort of like the Sambo influenced the jiu-jitsu out of sort of almost jealousy? I don't know if jealousy is the right phrase, but almost like man, I want to kind of be like that.
Yeah. I think, with leg locks for jiu-jitsu, it's a lot of people frowned upon them for a really long time, leg locks and ankle locks and things like that in jiu-jitsu, because you're not taking the typical course that you take during a jiu-jitsu match. Like, I'm not having to pass guard and get to side control or mount and then submit you from there, or take your back and then submit you. I basically have to skip all those steps, and if your legs are dangling, then I'm going to snatch one up and I'm going to take it and not have to improve position at all. And so people didn't like that because they didn't know what was happening to them. And so they kind of poo-pooed it for a really long time. And now, because of competition, people that were really good at them would start to win because so many people didn't know what was happening to them. And it was this very slice of grappling that not a lot of people were good at. Now it's become more and more mainstream. It's become more accepted. So I think, to your example with Dutch kickboxing and Muay Thai, I think there's definitely some parallels there.
Yeah. All right. Well, that is all we have for today. Thank you for joining us.
You're welcome.
I hope you had as much fun as we did. We're enjoying just listening. Thank you for coming on. I hope you know this, but you've been a massive impact on our school and our gym as well. So we owe a lot to you. Thank you for coming out. Thank you for taking the time.
Yeah, it was my pleasure, you guys. Thank you guys for having me.